Hello, and welcome to the CUGH Annual Leader Interview Series. I'm Dr. Keith Martin, the Executive Director of the Consortium of Universities for Global Health. Corruption is one of the most deeply neglected areas in global health and development. It affects the entire world, but it particularly affects those who are in low-income countries. Vast sums of money are stolen from them, which are monies that should and could be used for their own public needs and public interests, and yet they're taken and they're stolen and they're stored in other countries. We in advanced economies, we in the West, are part of this problem. We are an essential part of this problem, and so therefore we're an essential part of the solution to address it. And I'm very pleased today to have a global expert on this. Ms. Maira Martini is the lead in anti-money laundering and beneficial ownership at Transparency International. She is a Brazilian lawyer, an anti-money laundering specialist, and she is part of a very important consortium on anti-corruption that she works with brave investigative journalists around the world. So it's my pleasure to introduce Maira. Welcome, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be here and to discuss a little bit more about corruption and the impact it has across the globe.
Wonderful. So let's start actually with the amounts of monies, because they're staggering. How much money is actually taken and stolen through corruption?
I think this is a very difficult question to answer, right? There are a lot of figures out there, but because corruption actually happens behind closed doors, we don't know how much money is lost to corruption. We see and we watch every day the consequence of it, which go from really poor quality of resources and access to public service, to really what is happening at the moment, in Ukraine and other conflicts also around the globe. But what we know, for example, let's take only the African continent. We know that at least $89 billion are lost per year from the continent. This is money that could have been invested for the benefit of the population there, but is, as you said, stashed very often in countries in the West, in real estate or luxury goods or bank accounts far away from home.
And then that's the 89 billion. I remember listening to Christine Lagarde when she was the head of the IMF, and she had put the number at $1.5 trillion globally, but as you said, it's very difficult to know the exact amount, but it is a staggering amount, 10 times more than official development assistance. So let's take a look at what you said. Let's look at how is the money stolen? How is that money absconded from particularly low-income countries? How does it work?
Yeah, so what we have been observing across the years is that there is definitely a strong transnational component to corruption. For very long, we as a movement, we are present in more than 100 countries, Transparency International. We have been talking also about impunity and the fact that perpetrators of corruption are rarely brought to justice, and the challenge of making sure that those people are held accountable. But then there is another element to it, that is, these people never work on their alone. They have a network of individuals, and they rely really on the loopholes of the financial system, the global financial system, to be able to engage in corruption in the first place. So you have companies paying bribes, and then to hide the proceeds of corruption, to launder and enjoy. And that's what we have been focusing a lot of effort and energy in the last years to really disrupt this network, to make sure that because what we have been seeing is that when you take out a corrupt official, immediately the system continues to operate, right? It's like a machine that, so what we want to do is really disrupt that. We want to make sure that we go after and we close the systemic loopholes that enable that. And what are those? And that's where you started your question. I took a bit long to get to it. What we have observed across the years is that the number one vehicle that is being used to steal public funds, to launder money, is what we call anonymous companies. So those are companies that can be set up in different places. When we hear about it, we immediately think about offshore, no, tax havens and so on. It's not only there. There are actually many onshore countries across the globe where it's equally easy to set up an anonymous company. And that's the number one vehicle that is being used by corrupt individuals across the globe to engage in corruption and to launder money and to enjoy the proceeds.
And let's delve a little more deeply into that, because I think it's consequential. It's easy for us to say it's somebody else's problem in a low-income country. But as we saw with Credit Suisse, as we've seen in the UK in real estate, in the United States and Canada, we're part of the problem. Can you explain a little bit more about how those monies are stolen and how corrupt individuals take advantage of our own systems? Because they gravitate towards countries with the rule of law, right?
Definitely. I like to say that they like law and order for their money and for their assets, right? So it's definitely what we have been observing is that countries that have good reputation, political stability, strong rule of law are the countries where those corrupt individuals will seek a haven for their money, right? And sometimes for themselves as well. So most of the countries in the West have several things in place that make them very attractive. So on the one hand, they have this strong rule of law, good reputation, and on the other hand, they also have opacity. So is opacity in company formation, is opacity in the real estate sector, and then also you mentioned Credit Suisse, but other banks as well, willing to turn a blind eye or not doing the checks, the extensive that they are expected to. And this makes those countries very, very attractive. I think that's the combination. And you can add to that equation the fact that law enforcement, supervisory authorities in those countries are not as resourced as we thought they should be, right? And this also makes it even more attractive because the likelihood that you're going to be caught is actually very small. The likelihood there will be consequences is actually very small.
But there's an irony in that, isn't there? In the fact that it's very difficult for these corrupt individuals to be found and to be arrested and prosecuted in the countries that have strong rule of law. Can you explain? And there's a network of lawyers, accountants, and bankers and private equity agents that aid and abet this. They know this is happening, correct?
Yeah, there are a lot of cases where there's certainly complicity. There are other cases where you have those professionals actually not being as careful as they should be, not doing their job to a full extent. And I think there is an irony, but the fact that for many years this information was not even available, so it makes very difficult. Like you have rule of law and you have a system that, for example, judiciary that works and so on, but you don't even have the evidence because you're not collecting the information. So if you come to a country to open a company and nobody asks questions, authorities cannot even start, don't even have where to start from an investigation. No? I think this is changing at the moment, and now you start to collect more information, you start to have more evidence, and authorities can more easily connect the dots, but it's still a long way to go.
Why has it been taking so long since we've known this is a massive problem? On one hand, we have this perpetual discussion about who's going to reach 0.7 of GDP for official development assistance. And those sums in total are 1/10 of the amount of money lost to corruption. Why are we, on one hand, dealing with this little problem here, but in fact, we're losing these countries are losing 10 times the amount of aid that could, as you mentioned earlier, are really important for people's health, education, infrastructure. Why have we not seen more action in addressing these problems in high-income countries?
Well, there are a lot of people profiting from it, no? And powerful industries who are also profiting from it. So I think there is a powerful lobbying on one hand. So you can see, even now, you can see groups in the US, for example, already afraid that what is going on with the war in Ukraine will lead to more stronger measures on money laundering, for example, and they are already lobbying to make sure that rules are not moving in that direction. So you have powerful lobbying by the industry, and then you have a lot of countries that have also their economies turning around that, no? Take Switzerland and the banks, take Luxembourg and investment funds. So bringing more transparency to those sectors could mean also the sectors becoming less attractive, right? In some countries, I don't think are willing to do that, not yet.
So Maira, let's Russia's in the forefront right now for many good reasons on the corruption side. And you did a really consequential and superb report on this. Let's go down to some specifics and let's run through an example of how a kleptocrat in Russia or a corrupt individual in the Congo or in Zimbabwe or Angola, how do they launder their money? Give us an example of how they're taking millions out of their country and where it goes. Can you run it through for us?
Yeah, sure. So basically in a money laundering scheme, you have what we call three basic stages. No, the first stage would be the placement that we say. So the idea here is to take funds that in this case would be from corruption. We're talking about corrupt individuals, and mix this with funds that are legitimate. You want to make sure that it's going to be difficult to trace back this money to is it illegitimate source. So after that, what you try to do is about layering, no? So is disguising the trail. And here it's very, very common that you're going to use, for example, several of those are anonymous companies I was telling you about. You create very complex structures. Is one company that is owned by another company that is owned by another company, often based in different countries. And this helps to distance the person involved in the criminal activity as much as possible from the funds. And then you actually have the final stage, that is when you try to integrate, no? So you want to make sure that you can use that funds. No, I usually say nobody wants to keep all the proceeds of corruption under the mattress at home. You want to be able to spend. And many of those individuals, they like to spend this money. They want to buy yachts, they want to buy jets, they want to have luxury trips to Paris and invest in real estate and so on. And that's what we call then the integration. No? So usually to do that, they will need the help of several individuals. We mentioned those. They will like skillfully use the loopholes of the financial system and so on. And many of them, which is also what some of the Russian kleptocrats have been doing very well, and other kleptocrats from other countries as well, will go a step further. That is to do what we call reputational laundering. That is when you try to not only clean your money, but also clean your image. So you want to invest in sectors that could help profile you as a philanthropist, or for example, in sports. No, we have seen some individuals who purchased soccer clubs and so on, or you would even pay for PR firms and lawyers to help you improve your image in the West. So there are different ways. And this is kind of a part of a full package, let's say, from having the dirty funds, going through the different process to make it clean, and also make sure that then you have a reputation to continue, being able to do all of this and even extend your power and so on.
I think people, and that's a very important point you made, Maira, the reputational laundering that takes place in the West. And so they invest in and have their names on museums. They also invest in academia and think tanks, right? Can you describe a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we have now a couple of cases that are coming to light with Russia and Ukraine, but it's not uncommon, for example, that you have those kleptocrats making huge donations to first-year universities now in the UK, in the US, or even to agencies of the UN to prepare exhibitions related to their countries or to issues they care close to them and so on. There is a famous investigation by OCCRP, the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, called the Azerbaijani Laundromat, which laundromat is basically the term that OCCRP came up with that describes this laundering machine. Really, this mechanism is basically a mechanism that was created to do exactly that, launder money coming from different sources, organized crime, corruption, tax evasion, you name it. And in this Azerbaijani laundromat, one of the denouncements they made in the investigation is exactly how people very close to the government of Azerbaijan would use the West as reputational laundering, from paying politicians from the Council of Europe, for example, to say good things about Azerbaijan or to testify in favor of the electoral process, or even an architect in Italy received bribes to say good things about the country. So that's the extent that those individuals are willing to go that far.
And it's a bit shocking to see former politicians, even leaders of countries, after they leave office, start working for some of these kleptocrats to launder their own reputations, right? We've seen this all over the world. Yeah,
we have quite a revolving door that we call, no? That is the movement between the private and the private sector, public and private sector, in areas very close to the areas you used to work before or regulate even, no? And we have seen many examples of, yeah, people in power who have moved to the gas or to the energy sector very close and used their prior connections, no, to benefit the company and the interests of private individuals.
And some of the individuals and states they're working for are engaging in some massive human rights abuses, torture, murder, rape, disappearances, and they're willing to work with these leaders and countries for big payouts.
Definitely, yeah, it's quite appalling and shocking that those things are not taken into consideration, and that sometimes also economic interests and political interests will also play a role in the response by the West, right? Or whether you're willing to sanction, to go after certain kleptocrats and so on, depending on your economic interests, and it shouldn't be like this, right?
Well, I see the short-term interests of the individual or the small group as they're acting out to the detriment of the many. And to the colossal detriment to our colleagues and to those who live in lower income countries who pay the largest price of all of this mass theft. I think your laundromat metaphor is so apt, right? Dirty money in, cleanish money out the other end. But you said something really important that you work on, and that's the issue of beneficial ownership. And you're an expert in this. Can you describe again how shell companies, what we need to do to actually stop the use of shell companies and the opacities that we have in our system, so we can shine a light to ensure that we change those laws and regulations to stop the ability of people to hide behind these shell companies and sort of Russian doll companies. So one goes into the other, goes into the other. What do we need to do to stop this?
Exactly. So the answer is very simple. We need to start recording who benefits from those companies. So whenever a company is open, we should be able to tell who is the individual, the person, the physical person, who is behind this company, who makes the decisions, who benefits financially from it. And that's crucial information that's not recorded in many countries. And that's exactly what we have been calling for more than 10 years, is what we call beneficial ownership registers, which is simply a register that records the information on the real individuals behind companies. If a company has 10 layers, so one company, another company, we need to know who is that individual in the end of this complex corporate structure, no? And this is what we have been calling on different countries to do. And with shell companies, I guess, because we have like anonymous companies that have regular business, we just don't know who they are behind, and they may get public contracts, they may be able to hide conflicts of interest, and so on and so forth. And then you have the shell companies that are actually companies that don't do anything. They exist often just to hold assets, but they don't really have an activity. They don't employ people, so they either exist for making more complex, for example, for tax purpose, so it's easier for you to evade tax or so on, or to engage also in criminal activities, but they often don't have an actual activity or actual business, no? And regulating those is also pretty important.
And there are states in the United States that are known tax havens where people are using them as shell havens. Is that correct?
Exactly. There is some research done by partners in the Global Financial Integrity, where I think it's quite interesting, that shows that in the US, in some states, it's easier for you to open a company without having to declare anything than to get a library card. So if you go to get a library card, you will be expected to provide a lot more documents and a lot more information than if you try to open a company. And that shows, how we are actually just having our doors open for anyone who wants to come and abuse the system.
And another place where dirty money is being laundered and deposited, as you mentioned, are in high-ticket items like real estate. And I know in New York, in London, Vancouver, that real estate is bought up by dirty money. How do we change that?
There are two things that should happen, no? First is that the individuals who are helping in a real estate transaction, so being a real estate agent or a lawyer and so on, they should be required to ask questions as well. So who are you? If it is a company buying the real estate, who is the beneficial owner? Who is the person behind that company? And then if you are a politically exposed person, that we call someone high level in government, making political decisions, then you have to ask extra questions. What is your source of funds? Does your income, your monthly income, justifies and would allow you for such a purchase, no? And then we also need more transparency in the registration of those properties, no? In most countries at the moment, this information is also not available, no? So if authorities go to a real estate register, they will have a hard time finding out who is the individual behind that ownership if it's held by a company.
And what do we need to do? I mean, they can't self-regulate, because that's not going to necessarily be a failed tactic, I'm sure. This has to come from government. Is that correct, in terms of the obligation to report?
Exactly. Governments should oblige, and this exists in many countries. So for example, across the EU, this is an obligation. All European member states need to require professionals involved in real estate transactions to conduct those checks. But this is not the case in the US. This is not the case in Australia. This is not the case in many other countries. So there are loopholes there that are ready to be abused, right?
Let's talk just for a minute about getting that money back to the countries that own them. I mean, it's, as a physician, it's just heartbreaking to see, say, in Zimbabwe, I think the capital Harare only has one operating theater for maternity, right, where a woman can get a cesarean section, one functional for the whole city. Vast sums have stolen from Angola, South Africa, I think Congo, with people, and West Africa, horrible health outcomes. How can the monies, the vast sums that are currently being stored in the West in advanced economies, how can those monies be returned to the rightful owners, to the people of these countries?
Yeah, so that's a very important debate. And our recommendation has always been that you need to have a process to identify, trace, seize, confiscate, and recover those stolen assets. And once you do that, they need to be repatriated to the country of origin. But then there are ways in which you should do that, and you should do that, and countries should do that in a way that benefits the victims of corruption, no? Because there is always a risk that you repatriate to the politicians that stole it in the first place.
Yeah.
So coming up with a system that ensures the return of assets, the repatriation of assets in a transparent and accountable manner, in a way that benefits the population of that country, is difficult. We don't have a good model in place. We have different attempts in different countries, but the successes have been very limited, no? And that's something that I think the international community still needs to get right. There are a couple of examples where you involve civil society, for example, in the monitoring of the disbursement, and make sure that there is more transparency in the allocation of these funds again. But it's definitely a topic that requires a lot more thinking and also commitment by Western countries.
Why has it been so difficult to get those funds back? Since they're known assets that have been taken, they're known to be in advanced economies. Why has it been so difficult to return? I know part you answered the question, made some great points about why it's difficult. Is there anything else that you can say? Has anybody done this well at all to return the money back to their rightful owners?
I think we have a couple of good examples from Kazakhstan, for example, where there was a foundation that was created, and this is considered quite successful. I think some initiatives together with the World Bank in trying to recover, repatriate assets to Nigeria. But I think the main problem here is that the majority of funds that are stored in the West are not even identified. And that's the crucial point. We need to be able to better trace those assets and then take action. But the percentage of stolen assets that is currently being seized is very minimal. And I think that's the main issue at the moment, that we should do a much better job, or we should do a much better job in preventing those assets from leaving the countries in the first place, but also of detecting, no? And those things go very much together, because these measures I was talking about, so for example, the beneficial ownership registers, it would help with both things, would help with prevention and would also help with detection, right? So yeah, I think that's the way to go, of trying to improve the mechanisms basically, and this would facilitate identification of assets as well.
And in the last few minutes we have, let's finally look at solutions in two big areas. First, let's look at the countries from which those funds are stolen, Maira. So what do countries like Congo, South Africa, Zimbabwe, West African countries, ultimately when Russia changes, hopefully in a new era, what do those countries need to do to actually reduce the loss, as you said, of funds from their countries, this hemorrhaging of funds? Because the kleptocrats, they take control over they engage in state capture, right? They take control, they undermine the judiciary, they undermine the police, they destroy civil society, they pursue and abuse journalists, crush freedom of press. What do those countries need to do that are where the money's being stolen? What do they need to do to stop the hemorrhaging of funds from them?
Yeah, I mean, everything you mentioned there are things that need to be strengthened, no? And where do you start is the problem when you have a completely captured state, no? So it's definitely a challenge. But strong systems of checks and balance is what would be essential, no? To ensure that money is not stolen, is not siphoned out of the country. So investments in judiciary, audit institutions, strengthening of democratic process, no? Civil society participation, citizens participation, all of this is fundamental to improve. And when you reach a stage that you have a completely captured state, then I think some of these measures that can be taken from outside of that country to try to bring accountability to the people are very important. And that's where going after the assets, or going after in whatever way you can outside of that country to try to bring justice is really important. You know? So then the West also has a big role to play. So regulating those professional enablers, or the so-called gatekeepers, no, that should be keeping the gates closed to dirty money. So banks, real estate agents, lawyers, accountants, they all have a big role to play. Ending anonymous companies and shell companies, as we just talked about, the same. Having mechanisms to be able to go after assets, because one of the challenges is also the criminal prosecution, the challenge with criminal prosecution. So should be able to go after the assets without a criminal conviction, for example. No? So the UK has something called unexplained wealth orders, no? That would allow to investigate whether an asset is legitimate or illegitimate if the person cannot prove that had the money to purchase, for example. So there are different things that could be done that would end up having an effect on the power that those leaders in countries that are highly corrupt are able to exercise as well, no? And then perhaps help to break this vicious circle when you have a captured state.
Yeah, I think in global health and development, we tend to focus on the big H health medical side of the world and we don't pay any near enough attention to working with our colleagues in law and in political science and in development to strengthen public institutions and legal structures and frameworks so that citizens can actually have the right to know transparency in how they work, and that public institutions are accountable to the people and are not captured by the politicians. And then, of course, our work is you actually answered the other question by what we need to do in the West and in advanced economies to not continue to be part of this terrible hemorrhaging of funds from particularly low-income countries in a horrible way. But are there any final comments, Maira, Martini, that you'd like to make? Any messages to the global health community, development community, and what we need to be doing to support the great work you and your colleagues are doing around the world to shine a light on this this significant threat to international stability and development?
Yeah, I think we all can hold our politicians to account. No, we all can pressure them to make the right decisions, to make sure that we help bring those issues to the table during elections, during important decisions, and call on our leaders to really take action in a meaningful way. We had so many crises in the past 2 or 3 years, the global pandemic, for example, that really showed how important it is to address those issues, no, and how fundamental it is to address those issues. So I think all of us should keep that in mind. We also have a role, and we can pressure our leaders to do more.
Tell us, just for the last few minutes, at Transparency International, where you work, can you share where our attendees and our folks around the world can go to learn about the actual solutions that you described in this interview? Where can they go to find these solutions, there or with the investigative journalists you work with?
Yeah, sure. So on our website of Transparency International, we have a dedicated page on the work we call Dirty Money. That is basically everything that has to do with transnational corruption and the issues we were discussing today. So I think that would be the best to get the links to the other pages. And of course, you can sign up to our newsletter. We have a very nice weekly newsletter where we often talk about those issues, and also press releases and news on publications and so on.
Wonderful. Well, Maira Martini, Transparency International Global Health Anti-Laundering Expert, thank you very much for being with us today at the Consortium of Universities for Global Health. I hope the attendees today, I'm sure that they learned a great deal from you. Now it's up to us to be able to learn what we must do, as Ms. Martini mentioned, take that information back to our countries, advocate for those changes, because if we don't, they'll be continuing to see a loss, a hemorrhaging of funds that are 10 times greater than official development assistance. And those funds are being stolen from the poorest countries in the world. They're an obstruction to those countries' development. And in fact, they directly result in the loss of innocent lives from those who are least privileged, from the world's poorest. So it's up to us to be able to be part of the solution, particularly for those of us in advanced economies, to say no to dirty money that's coming into our organizations, and to shine a light on and advance the implementation of legal solutions that will end the global money laundering threat. Thank you for being with us today. We'll see you next time.